Yes.
There was a really good study done by the German Olympic Committee where these are all people that made the team, the Olympic team, and of those that did more than one sport up to the age of 16, they were more likely to end up medaling compared to people who just made the team.
Yes.
So there is evidence to support even the performances, as
Sure.
Jack said, the performance ceiling. Is that something that you discuss with them, or is it not sort of something that you get into?
No, I do, or I try to, but I don't really have much influence,
Yeah.
if any, on that.
No, well, neither do we. It seems like the popular idea at the moment is the more you do, the better you'll be.
Yes.
Particularly amongst parents who seem to be almost more competitive about it than the kids, which is another issue in itself.
It is. That's a big issue, that one. To illustrate that point a little, so one of my daughters was a very high level competitive snow skier. And when she was about, I think 13 or 14, I was unaware of it at the time, but her coach had her doing heavy weight deadlifts as a 13, 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And now she's 34 and she's got quite severe spinal disc degeneration causing major symptoms and severely affecting her life.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me that having very young kids and really pushing them very hard to exercise like crazy in very confined ways with heavy weights is not a really smart thing to do.
No, and I think there's lots of discussions about that, about what's appropriate level of
but that
stresses.
applies across a whole range of things.
Yeah, what's appropriate level of stresses for different age populations and what that means for future. We spoke about this concept a lot, and it probably leads nicely into a question around joint degeneration, but is when you have someone who's undertaking these activities, once they get to a certain level, there is a divergence of health to performance that occurs with a certain level of training and sport.
Yes.
I don't know that these discussions are necessarily being had. Everyone associates exercise, these days at least, with health.
Yes.
Once you
And
get
more
to
exercise is more health. Yeah.
once you get to a certain level of performance, as I'm sure you deal with every single day, it actually starts to be damaging to your, and particularly your musculoskeletal health in the long term.
Yes.
Not always, but there is an association.
Certainly potentially, yes.
Yes. The question that I wanted to get to is, what are you seeing in terms of the activity that people do and what that is meaning for things like joint degeneration, and what are the current options that they have going forward for managing these kind of joint degeneration? If you've been, say, high level, someone in snow sports, or you've been high level in football or rugby or soccer or whatever it is, and now your hips, knees and ankles are starting to fall apart in your late 30s, early 40s. What are the things that we're starting to see now in terms of managing those, and where do you think the future goes with that?
Okay. There are some parts that are attempts being made to manage it now, just in the way people train.
Yes.
And the training loads they have, and how if they have an injury, those loads are altered to compensate for that or to protect. So there's an element of that, and you certainly see that, and in football teams, for example. So in regard, and I keep coming back to hip, but it's what I sort of know a bit
that's what
about.
you work in, yes.
And so you see that now, so that kids in the draft are tested for their hips.
Yes.
To see whether, it varies in how carefully it's done, but it's done to some extent by all sorts of people.
What kind of testing do they do exactly?
They look at the range of internal rotation. That's a sort of starting point.
Yes.
And then, because that's a real marker for this type of problem. And then if they have significant reduction, I don't know if they do it now, there was talk that they'd x-ray them or scan them or, to look, to see what the shape of the hip was. I don't think they do it, but there was talk of it. So they may change the way they train on the basis of that, or at least if they start to develop symptoms of groin pain or osteitis pubis or something like that, then there's a whole variety of different symptoms they may get. And then you can alter how much load you put on them in training and how much twist